Well, welcome. Thank you all very much for coming. My name is Mark Grossman. I have the good fortune to be a supporter of the CERT organization. First of all, let me kind of thank all of you for being here. Thank everybody for taking the time. Thank you for all of those who organized this event. Kathy Silverman, thank you in particular. Mr. Holden, thank you very much for coming. I think the idea that you have taken on this responsibility to be part of, co-chair of, the Global Road Safety Caucus is an amazing and wonderful thing. I thought the letter that you sent to your colleagues was wonderful and really laid out for us exactly what we're going to try to accomplish over the next hour. So thank you, sir, for being here. I know that Mr. Cohen has had some conflict, but I hope he'll get here and I'll have a chance to say the same thing to him. And to the panel members, thank you all very much for taking time. We look forward to hearing from each one of you. It seems to me that the fact that you all are here, your collective presence is proof of this issue. And when I thought to myself, sort of meeting this challenge of international road safety, it's about international relations, it's about technology, it's about standards, it's about information sharing. But as I learned from Rochelle Sobel, promoting road safety is really about individual human beings and trying to put an end to the deaths and the grieving of so many families. So our plan today is pretty simple. I'm going to ask Rochelle to make a few comments. We'll then ask Mr. Holden if he would be kind enough to come and make a few comments as well. I'll come back and the panel will introduce itself and then we'll listen to their presentations and have a little conversation, take some questions from the audience, and we promise 3:30 we'll be finished. I know everybody's got a lot of other things to do. So if that would be an acceptable plan to everybody, we'll proceed. Rochelle, I'm going to ask you to come and join us.
So those of you who didn't notice before, you'll see why Mark knew I was here. Thank you, Ambassador Grossman, our distinguished moderator, and our advisor, our wise counselor, and our mentor. My name is Rochelle Sobel, and I am president and founder of ASSERT, the Association for Safe International Road Travel. ASSERT is a non-governmental organization that promotes global road safety through education and advocacy. It is dedicated to protecting travelers to and citizens of countries. ASSERT has worked with the Congressional Caucus on Global Road Safety since its inception and is honored to have helped coordinate today's briefing. ASSERT is a member of the UN Road Safety Collaboration and the Global Alliance of NGOs advocating for road safety. ASSERT is proud of its engagements with AFSA, the American Foreign Service Association, the World Bank, the Education Abroad community, the U.S. Department of State, and many multinational corporations. We are very grateful to the law firm of Hogan Lovells for its ongoing guidance and are hoping that Senator Norm Coleman will join us shortly.
Right here.
And he's right. Where did you walk to? I missed you. That is Senator Norm Coleman. And we also want to thank the FIA Foundation for its generous support of today's briefing. So we will soon hear compelling quantitative information describing the scale of death and injury from road crashes. We will learn about the critical need for accurate data, vital to our efforts to improve road safety. But permit me, before we begin, to put a human face on the figures. I founded ASSERT in 1995 in response to the death of my 25-year-old son, Aaron, who was killed in a bus crash in Turkey, along with 23 other passengers. According to the police, we're going to have a picture of him somewhere, I hope. Oh, he's right behind me. Can everybody see? So this was my son. And according to the police report, the crash was the result of reckless driver behaviors and poor road conditions. Aaron was a senior medical school student at the University of Maryland, and he had just completed his final rotation by volunteering in a hospital ward. And then he decided to tour Turkey for 4 days before coming home to graduate from medical school, a dream that never happened. In the aftermath of Aaron's tragedy, well, frankly, when I could finally think rationally, I began to ask myself how his crash could have been prevented. What action could I have taken? Could Aaron and everyone on that bus with him have taken? What information did we not have that we should have had? And where and how could we have accessed this information? What policies, regulations, preventative measures, knowledge, and/or training could the agencies, companies, organizations, and institutions, either directly or indirectly involved, have put into place to prevent Aaron's crash and the crash of far too many victims across the globe each and every year? Since the COVID lull, people are once again traveling increasingly to other countries for international diplomacy, commerce, education, adventure, sports, cultural, medical, and humanitarian reasons. The U.S. citizen outbound travel departures from the U.S. to other countries totaled over 10,634,000 in July of 2023, an increase of 16.5% compared to July of 2022, and back to pre-COVID numbers. At the same time, the world continues to experience a critical crisis in global road safety. Approximately 1.19 million people die each year as a result of a road crash, and between 20 to 50 million additionally are injured, and often with life-altering injuries. And while we remain deeply disturbed by the distressingly high road fatalities in the United States, close to 41,000 people lost their lives on U.S. roads in 2023, the fact remains that 92% of the world's road fatalities occur in low and middle income countries. Road crashes remain extremely high in many popular destinations. Travelers to other countries are particularly vulnerable road users. They, as drivers, as pedestrians, as passengers, and as cyclists, they are insufficiently aware of traffic laws, road circumstances, road cultures, and the state of available public and private transport, as well as pedestrian infrastructures. And many travelers who choose to or must drive themselves are not trained sufficiently to understand the conditions they will encounter. Road crashes are the leading cause of non-natural deaths for U.S. citizens traveling abroad. And according to the CDC, nearly 1/2 of medical evacuations back to the U.S. are the result of a road crash. We will soon turn to a panel of experts from various sectors of society, where we will learn about the challenges that they face when they send their employees, volunteers, and students abroad, the programs they have already put into place to protect them, and their plans and recommendations moving forward. And I'm very anxious, as I'm sure we all are, to hear what their plans are and what they are currently doing. And now it gives me great pleasure to present the co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Global Road Safety, Congressman Richard Hudson, and thank him for his extraordinary leadership and for sponsoring this briefing.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was very touching. I've heard Aaron's story before, but it gets to me every time. I really appreciate you sharing with us, but also the leadership you've shown and the incredible work you've done, rising like a phoenix out of that tragedy. You've made sure a lot of other families don't have a similar tragedy, so thank you. It's really an honor to be here with you and all these distinguished people. Senator, good to see you. I want to thank our panel, public servants and experts. Michelle said we've got this fabulous panel, but first a politician. So it's kind of like, I'm the commercial break before the good stuff, so I'll try not to take too long. But really appreciate all of you being here to present today. And Natalie, I was thinking about the first time I met Mr. Jean Todd when he was the president of FIA, and he had a meeting with me. He was very polite, but you could tell he was very busy. And but then I mentioned, by the way, as co-chairman of the Global Road Safety Caucus in Congress, I just want to thank you for. He goes, "You're what?" And he lit up, and my relationship with him was forged at that moment. We became very close friends, and please thank Mohammed bin Salim for continuing the emphasis in FIA. They bring a lot of awareness, so I appreciate that. Send that message back. I want to thank Ambassador Grossman also for being here, part of this expert panel. Appreciate your previous service to our country, but your service now in this role, very important. And finally, I want to thank Steve Cohen, my colleague, who's not able to be here. Maybe he'll make it, but Steve is, he's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. There's a lot of stuff we don't agree on, but this is something we really do, and we work very well together. And I appreciate his commitment to this. And I can't ever come to one of these meetings without thinking of my dear friend Alcee Hastings, who's the one that introduced this caucus to me, introduced this issue to me, and was really a mentor to me. Again, Democrats and Republicans can't get along. If you watch the news, you may not believe it, but Alcee Hastings really dedicated himself to this cause, and it's because of him that I'm a part of it. Steve Cohen and I just try to continue his work, very inadequately, I'm sure, but it's important because millions of people all over the globe are impacted by traffic accidents, inadequate policies, neglected infrastructure, including study abroad, U.S. military, travel, our diplomats, all impacted by this. And it should anger all of us because these deaths and serious injuries are preventable. That's why I'm committed to promote road safety practices here in Congress, protect my family and your family in our communities, but across the nation and around the globe as well. As co-chairs of this important caucus, Congressman Cohen and I have relaunched this caucus with the goal to raise awareness of the public health challenge posed by road crashes, especially for individuals working and living overseas. And as Congress works towards common sense solutions on road safety, I look forward to more briefings like this that can provide a platform for expertise and testimony from relevant communities and stakeholders. Together we can bring attention to this ongoing crisis, we can improve road travel, we can save lives, and that's what it's all about. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for being here today.
Might I invite you to say a few words as well?
I just wanted to make sure that the upper chamber was part of this process. Not only is it a very special thing when Democrats and Republicans in the House can come together at a time that we see so much partisanship, but I think we're kind of unified on this is the right thing to do. And Rochelle, again, we thank you for your incredible leadership in taking profound tragedy and using that to save so many other lives. And this is something that should be both bipartisan, bicameral, then both sides of the aisle and in both chambers need to do the things we can. I served years in the Foreign Relations Committee. I traveled all over the world, and my own awareness has been heightened just by the participation that I had working with Rochelle and ACER. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Staffers, listen, go back, come back with good ideas, make a difference. In the end, the world is a much better place if you save one life. And this is an opportunity to save many lives, so take advantage of it and love to do good things. Thank you very much.
Senator, thank you very much. So now it's time to turn to the panel. From where I am there, I can't quite see you all. So I think what I'd like to do is I'll come sit over here, and then I would just call on you one by one if you just introduce yourselves, and I think we've allotted 5 or 6 or 7 minutes for everybody to make their comments. Then we might have a question or two from me, and then open the floor for questions. So, Natalie, I would start with you.
Sure, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. My name is Natalie Drazen, and
Hold on one second.
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
kind of order of like the slides.
Oh, there's slides. All right, see?
Sorry.
I got it. So from in the State Department, you never have slides. So I never think about slides, so I apologize. So I need to go this way. Got it. Okay, we learn something every day. So, let me try again. I can't see. I clearly have got worse problems than that. So I'm going to start now with Tom. Natalie, I apologize.
That's okay.
Okay, Tom Hansgarry, please.
Thank you very much, and I remember working for Mark Grossman, almost 25 years ago when I joined the Foreign Service, shortly thereafter. So I'm Tom Hansgarry. I'm the president of the American Foreign Service Association. We represent nearly 17,000 Foreign Service members across 6 agencies. Maybe change the panel, the slide, please. There you go. And we're very proud of our service. We're celebrating our 100th anniversary centennial this year, along with the modern Foreign Service. You know, road safety, it's funny, we serve in, our diplomats serve in pretty difficult places, inhospitable places, dangerous places. I had 2 tours in Iraq, a tour in Afghanistan. But it's not really what's going to get you. It's bad roads, it's reckless driving. That is the biggest threat to our diplomats and Americans that go abroad. That is it, that's number one. So I'm so happy that Rochelle has taken this initiative. I had the opportunity to meet her last year, along with the work that Mark Grossman has done. And I really appreciate the Global Road Safety Caucus, Congressman Hudson, Senator Coleman, thank you for being here. This is really important. I don't know a person in the Foreign Service who doesn't have a story about some horrific traffic accident that's happened, either experiencing it themselves or knowing someone who has. And so it's really something of great import to our union, the American Foreign Service Association. And with that, we thought we would do last spring, a survey of our members and what their experience has been with traffic accidents and road safety abroad. And we got a pretty good response. And why don't we just start doing that now? So next slide, please. So you'll see that we had 793 respondents. It's incredible. I mean, 33%, 261 respondents answered yes to experiencing a vehicle traffic crash that resulted in a fatality or serious injury, or knew of someone who had. And it just goes down the list. Pedestrian, bicycle. I know, having served in some, developing countries, I had my own close scrapes. I know people who have been killed, badly injured, and so I really, we were really actually not surprised by the response from our members, because we knew that how important they look at this as well. So you see, it's an incredible percentage of people who've experienced vehicle, pedestrian, bicycle crashes, fatalities, serious injuries. It's really quite eye-opening. Next slide, please. So top countries for incidents. We kind of did like sort of a larger the name of the country of the more important in terms of accidents. Vehicle, I served in some of these places. It pointed at several countries where Foreign Service members served, and again, our ambassador to China, Nick Burns, remembers one incident that he had when he was actually he was ambassador to Greece, I believe, and he actually was in the back seat, of course, being driven around by his detail, and he got in a very awful accident, and the way there wasn't a sort of side airbags on his vehicle, his armored vehicle, and as a result, there was in front but not on the sides, and as a result he was seriously injured. So everybody has a story. That's the point I want to get across here, and how important it is that we focus attention with our colleagues in other countries to try to get better road safety for all. Next slide, please. So next steps. What are we going to do about all this information that we've gotten from, and we have, by the way, we have the full survey for you if you'd like it. We can send that around. We're happy to do that. But what we want to do is at least prepare what we can do as AFSA is at least prepare our diplomats that go overseas for what they're getting into. So we want to see the Foreign Service Institute actually institutionalize sort of training, information. ACERT can be a partner in that, we're hoping. And also when you get to post, you know, the regional security officer is involved with obviously the security of all official Americans there. We want to make certain that everyone is briefed as well on what the actual conditions are. So if you do drive, and everybody usually takes their personal vehicle abroad, it gets shipped and it gets there, and usually in one piece, not always, usually in one piece. And so we just want to make certain that is, what we've seen in this survey too is inconsistency. Some embassies really have good programs doing it, some don't. Again, we want to see just a consistent response to what people will face when they're living and working in a country. And so that's what we're hoping to do. You know, we want to work with ACER, we want to work with the Congress, anything that can be done to improve safety. And again, it's not just official Americans abroad, any American that goes abroad has this issue as well. And as you know, when we're abroad in our embassies, we take care, our number one priority is taking care of Americans. So this obviously fits in with that, that requirement as well. So with that, I'd like to say again, thank you for the Global Road Safety Caucus for organizing this, and you have a willing partner in AFSA, and happy to answer any questions. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm Liz Graycon. I'm the Managing Director of the Office of Overseas Citizen Services and the Bureau of Consular Affairs at the State Department. And I know I filled out that survey and probably could have filled it out several times because over a career of foreign service, I've been lucky. I haven't personally been involved in a serious vehicle incident, but I know many, many people that have. The other thing that I really love is ACERT's slogan on their banner on the left where it says, "Working toward a world where everyone returns home safely." Because that's also what we're doing in consular affairs. The department's highest priority is the protection and safety of U.S. citizens abroad. And we're very much working towards that world where everyone returns home safely. One of the ways that we do that is by providing accurate safety and security information to U.S. citizens considering a trip abroad. Rochelle shared some of the statistics with you. And we issued a record number of U.S. passports in the State Department last year. A record number of U.S. citizens currently hold passports. Something like 48% of U.S. citizens have a passport in their possession right now, up from under 10% 25 years ago. Those U.S. citizens are using them, right? They're not just getting passports to have another form of ID or because they love the pictures we put on them. They're getting them to use those passports and travel abroad. And so our goal is to get them safety and security information before they go so that they can make informed decisions about where they're going and what the risks are in those places. One of them, and you don't have to read this is tiny, tiny print, but it's just for you to know some of the resources that we're producing. We have a dedicated page on travel.state.gov, which is the only thing you need to remember. It's where all of our travel information is, travel information for every country in the world. We have a dedicated page on driving and road safety abroad. And then for every country, we have a travel advisory that recommends, okay, this is a country where risks are relatively low, a level 1 country, level 2 where we say you should exercise increased caution, a level 3 country where we really recommend that Americans reconsider traveling, or level 4 countries, a limited number of countries where we say U.S. citizens should not travel to this country right now because of the risks to you there. Countries like Haiti, Sudan, Venezuela, Yemen, countries where our ability to assist you should something happen, whether it's a serious crime, whether it's a road accident, is very limited. And for every country, we provide information. Can we go to the next slide too? So you don't have to read this at all, but this is Ireland's page, and it just says, you know, cars drive on the other side of the road. This is something you should know before you get in the car in Ireland. Do you need a specific kind of driver's license, an international driving permit? Do you need insurance if you're going more than 25 miles into Mexico? We try to share information on potential hazards and road conditions, local roads or areas to avoid, areas where we, as State Department personnel, are not allowed to go because the safety and security risks are so high. I can't tell you as private Americans not to go there, but I can say I'm not allowed to go there because my regional security officer told me not to. I'd also recommend you not go there, though you also face those risks. It's rare that the risks are specific to me as a U.S. government employee. They're to everybody. In some countries, I served in Serbia, you were required to have an orange triangle, an orange vest, a first aid kit in the back of your car. Still in the back of my car. I left Serbia in 2015. I never had to use it, but I still have that Serbian required first aid kit with me. Are there local laws or driving culture you need to know? Local emergency numbers. Is it 123? Is it 911? Is it something else? Do you need to have a seatbelt? We recommend you have one anyway, but are you required to have it in this country? Do you need any special insurance or anything else? And I'll give one really specific example of something that's happened recently, and it's that in South Africa, Waze and Google Maps were routing US citizens, tourists in general, through really, really dangerous neighborhoods around the airport in Cape Town. So US citizens who'd been on a vacation, a safari, just trying to return their rental car, were being routed through critically high crime parts of Cape Town, were being stopped, robbed, and in some cases killed. It's a case where we were sort of unusually proactive, and we reached out to Google Maps and we reached out to Waze, and it took some convincing, but to convince them to change their GPS routing. I don't care if it's the shortest way, I don't care if there's the least traffic going that way. You cannot be sending people through these routes. And so in addition to warning US citizens about these risks, and front and center on the South Africa Travel Advisory, it says you need to look at a map and you need to get directions from your hotel on how to get back to the airport. Do not use your GPS travel service, because there's so many of them. We may have gotten Waze and Google Maps, we may have missed some other service that you're using to get there. In Mexico, it says, the Mexico motor vehicle accidents are a leading cause of US citizen deaths in Mexico. Important for people to know. But I'll be really frank about the challenge. There's a lot of safety and security risks we want to warn US citizens of. It's hurricane season. There's high crime. People are being drugged in Medellin. There's risks of terrorism. There's road safety risks. It is really hard in this digital age to get people to read all of the information that we want to give them. And I think that's our biggest challenge. So I sort of open that up. And if people have, so we really appreciate the work of particularly constituent staffers and congressional officers, the work of organizations like ACERT and the Caucus to help us educate US citizens about these risks as well. Because it really is, I think it's one of our biggest challenges. We have all this information for you, but how do we get it to audiences that need to hear it, particularly younger audiences, mostly using their phones to read information. They're not going to scroll through a webpage maybe that looks like that slide. And so those are some of the things we're working on right now. Thank you.
All right.
Is this on? Yes. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amelia Dietrich from the Forum on Education Abroad, where I'm the Senior Director for Research and Publications. I want to thank ACERT for inviting us to be here today and thanking all of you to take some time out of your afternoon to learn about what we do to try and help students be as safe as possible while they're traveling abroad for educational purposes. The Forum on Education Abroad is a 501c3 nonprofit association that has members that are primarily about 700 U.S. colleges and universities who are engaging in operating study abroad programs for their students at the post-secondary level, and then another 100 or so organizations that include NGOs, private companies, associations like ACERT and others who are otherwise engaged in the activities of operating study abroad programs for U.S. college and university students. And they're united in their membership and in their commitment to our work at the Forum because of this idea of being committed to executing high quality education abroad programming for students. We are recognized by the Federal Trade Commission and the U.S. Department of Justice as the Standards Development Organization, or the SDO, for U.S. higher education abroad, which means that it's our job to be the convener of all of the stakeholders in our field around conversations to define what is the minimum and what is the best practice and gold star in terms of comprehensive standards for quality for education abroad. We don't write the standards, I like to say, but what we do is we pull together folks who work in study abroad offices on campuses and faculty who lead programs and students on programs and program alumni and their parents and government representatives and administrators higher up at campuses and things like that engaging all those folks to share their perspectives about what good practice looks like and what bar we can set in terms of expectations for quality. And our standards of good practice for education abroad, if you want to move to the next slide, are now in their 6th edition. They are comprehensive, so they also touch on topics related to student learning and development and institutional relationships and partnership management. But of course, a big part of what you find in there has to do with health and safety. And how to help students manage their well-being and to minimize and mitigate risk to the extent possible as an organization or an institution responsible for operating student global learning programs. Because we really believe that if a student's not well and thriving and feeling safe, then they can't make the most out of their educational opportunities while they're studying abroad. And so we really think that's a foundational part of the process. And so we at the Forum, in addition to these standards of good practice that we develop, basically engage in a lot of different training, programming, research, and resource development that is all built around helping people implement this work and continuing to strive for good practice, continuing to learn more and more about what good practice looks like to help students be safe, to help them learn, to help them grow, and to return home from their study abroad experiences able to apply what they've learned through their global learning in their personal lives and in their professions long after they've returned home safely. The standards give, in broad strokes, I would say a couple main steps that echo a lot of what we heard from our colleagues from the Foreign Service and the Department of State in terms of how do you keep students safe, what do you do to keep them as safe as you possibly can, recognizing that the risk can never be zero and there's a lot of factors in play. The first thing is, as you both said, identifying what are the risks that are specific to an education abroad program's location or locations. We point our membership and our colleagues in education abroad to ASSERT's road safety review resources, to the Department of State's resources around these to help folks identify what are the risks where we are sending our students and what do we need to know. Step 2 is then how do you mitigate those risks as much as possible? How do you design policies, program itineraries, etc., that are going to try to avoid the worst risks where possible. Make sure we're not sending students to go live or spend time in really dangerous neighborhoods. Prohibit students from renting cars and driving on unfamiliar roads while they're studying abroad, because that can be, as we know, a very high-risk activity. Those are some of the examples of what we do. And then, as you said, another big part of this for students as well as for all U.S. citizens traveling abroad is making sure that they're aware of their own responsibility and their own ability to manage their risks by having as much information as possible. And so we spend a lot of time trying to help institutions and organizations think about what are the best ways to communicate the information to students, when are they ready to hear it, how are they best absorbing it, and how do we stay at the front of the curve in terms of what kinds of technologies, devices, competing attentions are at play to help alert students to these risks and to give them strategies that empower them to make good decisions for themselves when they're faced with those potential risks, because of course we can't be with them 24/7 even if we might like to be. And then the last part that's a through line of all our standards of good practice that I think is especially relevant in the health and safety space is this idea of continuous improvement, of being informed by data and evidence and critical reflection on past practice in order to improve what you're doing for the future. And so if you can go to the next slide, Gail. We've been engaged over the last year in the latest iteration of what is more than a decade's worth of work at the Forum on Education Abroad, started by many people besides me that have been involved in this effort, to get a specific measurement of student risk on education abroad. So in this latest student risk report, we include data from 56,000 U.S. study abroad students. That's about 25% of U.S. students that studied abroad for college credit last year, tracking 11 different kinds of incidents that they were engaged in, as well as 8 different kinds of potential program level disruptions, so incidents that would not just disrupt a single student's participation in the educational experience, but also an entire program, so the whole class is not able to continue with their educational experience. And then we try to collect data about factors related to those incidents. So when did they happen, where did they happen, what was the result of those, including death, hospitalization, a need to withdraw from program, again, to try and understand if students may have specific risk profiles that are not quite the same as other kinds of travelers. It's not quite the same as being a foreign service officer. 75% of U.S. study abroad students last year studied abroad in 5 countries in Western Europe. None of them were on your list of the places that have high rates of road safety issues. So trying to understand specifically what is happening with students that are in some ways mostly young adults, and therefore maybe in terms of their risk tendencies a little more high risk, but also in some ways people who get a lot of educational preparation before studying abroad and have a lot of supervision through their educational programming that might also help reduce risks in some ways. And so trying to capture what that data looks like. We're only in our first year, and thankfully in our first year of data, we haven't seen a lot of tragedies related to road crashes, but with the help of ASSERT, we have incorporated road crash language into our incident collections. And our plan is to continue this data collection over time. So biannually, our participating organizations will continue to share incident data from their programs so that we can build a larger data set that will help us get some more nuanced insights over time, and to continue to share those with our colleagues at ASSERT, with the larger public, and of course with colleges and universities running study abroad programs, so that we can use that data to look back so that we can look forward and say, what have we been doing well, and let's keep doing more of it. What maybe haven't we been doing well? How can we do something better in that regard? And so we're really excited about this work, excited to share it with you all, and hopeful that it can continue to contribute to evidence-based good practice that helps students stay as safe as possible so they can be learning and having fun while they're studying abroad. So thank you all very much for your time. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good afternoon. My name is Jasminka Goldoni-Lestadius. I'm occupational health physician and work in World Bank headquarters in Washington, D.C. It's my pleasure being here with you, and it's very interesting how we can learn from each other and have different perspective on the same problem. In the World Bank group, there are about 30,000 staff that works in 143 countries. We have more than 200 country offices around the world, and most of them are in low and middle income countries. So road traffic is one of our highest and most serious occupational health risks. So how we are dealing with it as organization, it is really very complex, but to start with some sort of regulation, we do have road traffic policy for our staff, which defines our roles very in detail, and we know what role we are playing in the policy implementation. Overall, road safety is everybody's responsibility. So it starts from senior management, from organization as such, to every single staff member. You can provide all security measures, but if people don't buckle their seatbelt, that's their responsibility. I mean, you have to play your role. So the policy implementation is overseen by Road Safety Committee, which has representatives of all stakeholders in the organization. So it's corporate security, it's health and safety department, there's services, there is legal, there is insurance representatives, so everyone who has anything to do with road safety is included. And of course, as a physician, I'm representing Health and Safety Directorate, and we have our specific role in the whole program. We take care, first of all, of drivers in the bank, so we are responsible for medical clearance of bank's drivers. We have around 700 drivers across the globe, and we are following actually recommendations from DOT for commercial drivers. So we make sure that we regularly oversee medical clearance in detail all our drivers. Then there are many other things before people go, for example, for assignments in foreign countries. They are medically cleared. For all travelers and staff abroad, we have also a website with detailed information and ASSERT country risk road safety reports and reviews are one of our main sources of information, detailed information for both travelers and staff who live in these countries. We really do appreciate this is years-long collaboration and very important to us. Of course, as previously mentioned, to get people to read every detail and to really follow advice, so that's a challenge, because before they leave for their mission they have all kinds of other preparations. So we do our best to remind them to collect information of risk that are waiting for them on location of their journey. Also, as a medical department, we are taking care of our travelers if they get into road traffic crash. We do medical evacuations. We provide support in the country where it happens if it is possible. We provide psychological support for victims of road crashes. And so this is our specific role in the implementation of the policy. Talking about data very important. So the policy was launched after two things. One was road traffic survey, road safety survey, where we collected data at that time from travelers only in 2008. We had like 5,000 responses, and that was absolutely shocking what people were talking about. I mean, their stories, first that we asked about all crashes and near crashes in the past 3 years, and to describe circumstances, to understand what's modifiable risk out of all that. But after a very long survey, we got stories also, what people encountered in their journeys. That was eye-opener, so we did analysis of that, but it was still not enough until tragedies hit. Two tragic crashes with loss of life, with permanent injuries. That was the final trigger when the policy was launched, and since then actually we repeat these surveys regularly. So now we are at our third survey, just getting ready to launch it. We realized in the latest one in 2017, and then pandemic came and we didn't do the one at that time, but we learned that yes, policy implementation as we perceive it was rather good, but when you ask people, a lot of them didn't know their roles as road safety focal points or director of country offices or drivers. So we did update all the documents again based on survey results, and now we are getting another one in June. Looking forward to see whether we move the needle with all these activities. So it is very important in implementation of road safety policy in such a global organization to have your eyes on the ground. So in each office we have road safety focal point who is in charge of what is happening at that place. So it knows all tasks regarding the drivers, regarding fleet maintenance, regarding advice to staff and travelers. So it is very important to have such a network, because you cannot in one central place control what's happening on the planet. That's just not feasible. So also we have all kinds of data collection. In addition to the survey, we are monitoring also reports on road traffic crashes and near crashes. Here again, problem, how to get people to report. And even workers' comp doesn't work in that sense, because people are covered by health insurance, and workers' compensation provides medical costs, so they're covered anyway. People just don't report, so there's typically a great discrepancy between what we get in official reporting systems and what people report in the survey. Numbers are much higher in the survey, so I don't have numbers and slides, unfortunately, but discrepancy is enormous, and you come to that again point, what is incentive for people to, if they don't report road traffic crash, what kind of safety incidents they are willing to report at all. So yes, we do have a lot of data, dashboards and everything, but we are always aware that it's not the full picture. It's always underestimate, and we always have to be watching what is happening with this in mind, that reality is much worse than what we can picture from data or stories, whatever we wish to call it. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Hello again, everybody. My name is still Natalie Drazen, but wouldn't it be funny if I changed it on you? Thank you so much for having me today, Assert, and thank you, Senator and Representative and Ambassador, of course, for being here and for your leadership. The FIA Foundation is a global philanthropy that works with our grantees all over the world to have road safety represented in high-level agendas, from the World Bank to the UN to the WHO. And of course, then we work with our grantees on the ground in almost every country to implement those agendas. And you can go to the next slide. We're talking about this pandemic on wheels today that is killing more Americans abroad than any other cause, right? And it's preventable. Every single one of these deaths is preventable. But to prevent them, we need good data. And that's why I'm very grateful for the report that was presented, because it shows us how we can use good data to drive good solutions. So today I want to present just one solution, one global solution to this very global problem. But before I present it, I just want to ask your thoughts, right? If you had to guess, which institution is the most trusted in the world? Is it government, media, or business? So hands up for media. Okay. Hands up for government. I know I'm asking that in the right place. Okay, well, hands up for business. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about. So businesses are really the most trusted institution in the world. That's what our polling shows, right? And when safety is prioritized at work, it has positive ripple effects that go all the way to homes and communities. And the private sector, of course, is a main user of roads globally, so they have a responsibility to prioritize safety. And this also has benefits to them. It's good for their bottom line. And the injuries and the fatalities that result from crashes on the commute and in the workplace itself are really expensive. They cost an average Fortune 500 about $42 million a year. So for the private sector, road safety means fewer expensive crashes and also better fuel efficiency, just as an example. There's lots of benefits. So imagine if the private sector reported on safety the same way it reports on its carbon footprint, right? Think about how far we've come just in the last decade when carbon footprints became part of CSR or ESG or pick your acronym. I mean, just as an example, I'm wearing shoes that are made of plastic water bottles. Right? Do they cost more? Yes. Do I feel a little bit better wearing them because I'm doing something good for the environment? Yes, I do. So what if we did the same thing for safety? You might decide to work for an organization that prioritized your safety more than another organization. You might decide to shop at one place that prioritizes safety more than another, right? You might decide to go to a country that is safer, not just generally, but also on its roads, instead of a different one. So imagine just how many lives we would save if the private sector competed on safety. So how do we convince the private sector to do this? Well, one way is through this index. And the idea is that we collect data on fatalities and serious injuries disaggregated by race and age and sex and everything else, right, across an organization's entire value chain. So I'm not just talking about employees and contractors, but I'm also talking about third parties and all the people that they hit, right? You have to account for all of these crashes. And we've actually piloted this index, it exists, right, with a host of organizations. You see them on the left. And it's represented in several global areas on the right, and there will be more, including the halls of the UN General Assembly and the upcoming ministerial on road safety in Marrakesh next February. And it's not just limited to the private sector. There's actually government organizations that are working on this as well, because the government, of course, has fleets too, right? We can do this as well. And so just imagine the impact of an index like this in reversing the trend that we're talking about here today. It's really quite tremendous. It has so much potential in saving lives that our own USDOT actually called this a first mover or an ally in action in implementing their national roadway safety strategy. So if you're interested, or you know anybody who might be interested in implementing this index, which is free, by the way, at the moment, let me know. And just one last thing. If we're going to address the issue that we're talking about today in this report that we're discussing, we need more financing about global road safety, right? It's not just about informing people before they travel, it's about changing roads and vehicles to make them safer. It's about recognizing the fact that we are humans and we make mistakes, but we can create environments that ensure that those mistakes aren't death sentences. So fortunately, the US is one of the biggest donors to global road safety via the World Bank, and others have followed. India is a good example. The Asian Development Bank joined the World Bank to fund $500 million worth of road safety initiatives to reduce fatalities by 30% in 5 years. And in nearby Bangladesh, they have a similar project. And what's really neat is that the local government has matched this funding, right? So when we fund through MDBs, we actually get local government funding too. So addressing road safety at scale is definitely possible. But if you look at the current levels, it's only at about $700 million per year. And if we were to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we need at least double that at minimum. So if you want to learn more about road safety funding generally and what we need to save lives abroad, I encourage you to check out this QR code that has our report. And finally, I want to congratulate you on this report. I look forward to reading it and thank ASSERT again. And just to take a moment to recognize that everyone in this room, I would bet, has a story, right, that is behind why you're sitting here today. And our goal is that in working together, that we can ensure that one day we don't have any more stories to tell. And I'm confident that we can get there. Thanks.
Just join me one more time in thanking the entire panel. So as I said, we promised we'd try to end around 3:30, but I do want to give you all a chance to ask a question or two. This panel is a remarkable group of people, and we should take advantage of it. Senator Coleman,
First of all, a great panel. It's really fabulous. The government, the global community, students, Foreign Service. In the survey that Foreign Service officers, one of the things I looked at was it was almost like a grouping. So bicycle accidents were happening in Latin America, and the pedestrian accidents seemed to be, most of those were African countries. So one, what do we got that data? Is there anything that we do with it? Does that move us to do something, to get a message out somewhere so that that data has some impact?
We hope so. We want to use that survey to and we can disaggregate that data as you suggest. First of all, to protect official Americans abroad, and then engage with with the host governments on things that we're noticing. Now, I don't want to. We only had a little less than 1,000 folks who took this, but at least it's some data that exists. And I'm sure there's other organizations that have data in respective countries. But yeah, I mean, we see this as a means not only to protect Americans abroad, but to make those countries safer for everyone. So absolutely, we don't want to have this survey or any survey really just kind of in a vacuum, but it actually accomplishes something.
If you'd allow me, Senator, could I ask you? I mean, your survey was enormous compared to the actual. Did you find the same kind of result and then turn it into action as the senator talked about?
We did turn into action. We actually were calculating the rate of crashes and near crashes per country. So we had actually red flags in country, 15 top risk countries where we started our policy implementation. This survey really gives, when you ask questions carefully, give you a lot of actionable information. We did not distinguish bike accidents versus vehicle versus pedestrian. I mean, there are a million ways how you can
I
ask.
was wondering, so
Yes.
like so you saw Mexico, you saw Colombia, And I'm wondering, is this something either in Latin America cultural, is there something instruction, is there something that you could, I don't know that there's an answer to that.
Yeah, you investigate at the level of drivers, vehicles, roads, and laws, let's say. So what is modifiable, what is low-hanging fruit, what you can do right now, for what you need investment, and so on. You can develop the whole action plan, but it has to be asked in such a way that gives you enough information to understand exactly the reason. I mean, otherwise you can just say, well, that's really bad, so what, and then what? So, yeah.
Please,
So-
Hannah.
I can try to answer that if you'd like. So what's interesting about that report is it's very reflective of global trends beyond just Americans, right? And what we see is that in Africa, the income level is such that the predominant mode of travel is on foot. And everybody in the world is a pedestrian, right? But very few roads, in fact, we've calculated that a tiny fraction of roads are up to minimum safety standards in our world. In Latin America, as you see GDP rise, the first thing people are gonna buy is a bike, because that's access to school and healthcare and a job. And frankly, what we're seeing right now is that as GDP is rising, the next step is a motorbike. And so crash rates among people on motorcycles and head trauma is skyrocketing in Latin America. So through the FIA and FIA Foundation, we're actually working on helmet safety standards there, on having something that is, not a subpar helmet and legislation that actually requires people to wear a helmet. But we take that data and we feed it to the government to work with them to have minimum safety standards for all vulnerable road users. That's a good question.
Great, thank you, very good question. Yes, sir.
Thank you guys all for speaking. My question is for Ms. Crisson and Ms. Dietrich. You guys talked about how there's no perfect solution to any of this. And I'm just thinking, as a young American, I was in Mexico over spring break, and my mode of transportation was Uber. And I know a lot of study abroad kids, they're probably using Uber as well, and we're all enticed by the young drinking age, and we're not the brightest people, so we're going to Uber ride. Are there any regulations? And I know you talked about like Google Maps and ways like to prevent from drivers going to bad areas. Are there any ways to prevent bad Uber drivers? Because I was just hopping into Uber because I didn't know any better, but my mom was like really worried about that. Is there any regulations about that?
So I'll say if you were out drinking and you get in an Uber, you just made probably the safest decision that you could have made, right? And you got into an Uber, and like an actual Uber, run by a company that has safety standards, that can track its drivers, you probably made one of the best decisions you could have made, as opposed to getting on the back of a motorcycle, which was probably less expensive, or getting into an unlicensed taxi, or a guy who just said, taxi, taxi, taxi on the side of the road. So it's that kind of thing, helping people to make the best decisions you can in an imperfect situation, and knowing what the risks are in a place. So I think you
Is
absolutely
Uber
made the right
regulated the
decision.
same way in the foreign countries?
Uber, yeah, the same. Uber has the same regulations. They're subject to local laws. So I was telling a story on the way over here about how Uber is not allowed in Colombia, but it exists. And so when we took an Uber in Colombia, you had to sit in the front seat and pretend to be the driver's cousin if you got stopped, because the driver could get in trouble, the passenger wouldn't. But Uber in general has some kind of check on the driver has a license, is it a valid license? They also know where you went, right? It's the same app. So if you God forbid, don't show up where you're supposed to show up. We have had success overseas asking Uber to share the records with us about what the license plate on that vehicle was, and where it was last seen. So.
And if I can also add, it's about, you raise a fantastic point, and yes, congratulations on a very good decision. It's about pushing Uber and Lyft and others to hire safe drivers who are driving in safe vehicles, right? That your vehicle has airbags and seatbelts, which it may or may not in Mexico. And so we've actually talked to Uber about adopting this index, so thank you for validating my conversation with them.
And I would love to add that Uber has actually turned to Assert, and we have been working with them really for the last, 3 years, Kathy? Where they've asked us how can they improve their safety in other countries. So it's nice that they have this concern, they have this interest, and again, congratulations that you didn't do it yourself, right? Driving yourself is frequently the mistake.
I'm guessing when you asked that question, you didn't expect all this praise.
So I would say also going to the analog route, the good old fashioned low tech things that we always tell students are also like, and I don't know if you did this, hopefully you did, do it next time if you didn't, plan ahead before you start drinking. Maybe designate a sober brother or sister among you to keep their wits about them. And I, for example, travel internationally a lot for work. I share my location on my Lyft with my husband so that he always is like, he can call and check in quickly if something doesn't look like it's on board. So also good practices, not just for road safety specifically, but good safety in general.
So one more question before I make a quick summary. Good. Well, again, let me thank you all very much. I thought the idea that this is a pandemic on wheels, that's a very interesting and good way to think about it, so thank you. If I listen to all of the speakers, you think about the panel, let me just give you 4 themes here and then I want to end. Number 1, it's clear that data is the key thing here, right? How to get it, how to use it, how to make sure that other people can use it once it exists. And so whether it's a survey for the very first time like AFSA has done, the work all of you have done actually on creating more data is obviously hugely important. And I think this index is particularly important because it's a good piece of action. And you're right, I mean, people do now look at companies and say, you know, on what basis are you hiring? On what basis are you doing things? So data which leads to action, which leads to something like an index. Secondly, is the question that a number of you have talked about, which is to say, so if you have all this information, and it goes out to students, it goes out to corporate leaders, if it goes out to the thousands of people who are at the World Bank or people in the State Department and the Foreign Service, how do you get them to actually look at it, and then look at it and do something about it? So that's clearly something key as we all go forward with this work on road safety. Third thing is that what's also clear in all of the cases here, and I hope that you all will take the opportunity to talk to each other, is that this is a shared responsibility. One group of people, corporate, World Bank, State Department, education abroad, can't solve this problem. And so this is a shared responsibility and one I think we all need to take extremely seriously. And then finally, the other thing is to kind of end where Rochelle started, and Congressman Hudson and Senator Coleman, is I've always tried to lead a life that says, you know, it doesn't have to be this way. And it seems to me that road safety is a classic example of something, it doesn't have to be this way. And if it's true that it doesn't have to be this way, then the idea is to start now to try to change it. And so I think all of the people who have come together in this room are committed to that thing. Final for me, which is the other point that everybody has made, which is that everybody has a story. And that's certainly true. And so I wanted to end this hour by just again thanking Rochelle.